POCO X2 versus iPhone 11 detailed camera comparison. I know you guys have been eagerly waiting for this one. Hey guys, it's Saga from TechWorks and let's get started with this video. Some of you always ask me to make these camera comparisons with Gcam installed on Android phones. So keeping that in mind, I have included a few Gcam samples from the POCO X2 in this comparison. If you guys saw my dedicated camera review of the POCO X2, you guys know it has got the best set of cameras for a smartphone priced under 20,000 rupees. And we of course know that the iPhone 11 packs in an amazing set of cameras. So this is going to be an interesting comparison. As always, let me make this very clear at the beginning. None of these phones compete directly or even indirectly with one another. And there is a huge price difference between the two. Someone who was going to get the iPhone 11 won't change his or her mind and get the POCO X2 instead. Or someone who is planning to get the POCO X2 is not going to extend their budget 4 times and get the iPhone 11. There are many other reasons for why there is such a huge price gap between these phones. But the point of this video is to show you guys how close the cameras on budget smartphones have come to flagship smartphones, and you don't need to spend a ton of money on flagship smartphones just to get amazing looking images. We have over 100 image and video samples to go through. So instead of taking you through all the camera specs on both these phones, I will just put all the relevant information on this slide. You can pause the video and check it out if you want. Before we get to comparing the image and video samples, if you are new to this channel, please spare a few seconds of your time to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon next to it. That way, YouTube will make sure that you are notified whenever a new video goes up on this channel. Starting with the daylight images, we can clearly see a few differences in these images right away. Since the POCO X2 is packing a 64 megapixel primary sensor as opposed to a 12 megapixel one on the iPhone 11, most of us straight away think that the images from the POCO X2 will have more details in them. But the difference in detail doesn't seem very obvious. Even as we zoom in, we don't see the images from the POCO X2 showing that many more details. Its images have more contrast, while some of the images from the iPhone 11 appear to be a bit too flat, but they are actually showing much more details in the shadows. We notice these things if we are zooming way in. But when you look at these images from this far, you won't notice too many of these differences, which I think we all can agree is a point in favor of the POCO X2. I wish POCO was a bit more consistent with its performance. In some of the situations like this, it failed to capture most of the details on the wooden plank, while the iPhone 11 did an amazing job. Now if you install the Gcam mod on the POCO X2 and compare its images with the ones from the iPhone 11, the difference between the two is reduced. And in some cases, you can see the Gcam images from the POCO X2 being just as good if not better than the ones from the iPhone 11. There is a very noticeable green tint to the images shot with the Gcam on the POCO X2. You can try and fix it with editing after you have clicked the images. I think if you are willing to take the extra steps of installing the Gcam on your phone in the first place, I am sure you will not mind the extra step of applying a little bit of editing to these images. If you want to see the POCO X2 perform better than the iPhone 11 in higher dynamic range situations, make sure to go to settings within the Gcam app and set the HDR plus enhanced frames to high. Once you do this, it will take slightly longer to capture the shot and even longer to process it, but the resulting images will have much better details in the shadows than the iPhone 11. These images look a bit too processed because they actually are, which might not look very natural to some of you. But even with the Gcam installed on the POCO X2, iPhone 11 manages to take a bit better and natural looking images in most of the situations. I understand that finding and installing a working Gcam mod and making modifications in the settings to make it take better images might take a bit of time, and majority of the average users getting this phone might not even be interested in doing this. Keeping that in mind, going forward, I will mostly compare the images shot with the native camera app on both these phones with just a few Gcam samples in between to show when it makes sense to use it. Moving ahead, iPhone 11 seems to show natural looking colors in most of the shots, whereas the POCO X2 seems to add a tad bit more saturation, and depending on your color preference, you might like one over the other, which is completely fine. On the POCO X2, you can even turn on the AI scene detection mode if you want your colors to pop out even more. When it comes to capturing high dynamic range situations like in this shot, iPhone 11 pulls way ahead. Look at how beautifully it managed to expose the subject while keeping the highlights of the sky in the background in check, while the POCO X2 just blew up the highlights of the sky. Even in this sort of images, look at how well the iPhone 11 managed to expose the sunlight falling off the trees on the footpath. And you can see the POCO X2 again blowing out those highlights. It is in situations like this that the HDR plus enhanced mode on the Gcam can come in handy. POCO X2's sensor is capable of giving us good results, but it is being held back by the image processing that POCO has put in the background of this phone. Both these phones come with a normal and a wide lens to let you capture more of the scene in your shot. Here is what a primary camera on both these phones can capture. And here is how much more of the scene the wide lens on these phones lets you get in your shot. The wide lens on the iPhone 11 is a millimeter or so wider, giving it a wider field of view of the two. Images from these wide cameras are not as sharp as the ones from the primary camera, and there is some distortion towards the edges. This is because primary cameras have a better quality sensor coupled with better lenses. This is just how things are on all of the smartphones at the moment. There is a noticeable change in color temperature and white balance when we switch the lens on the POCO X2. iPhone 11 on the other hand puts a lot of work in the background to match the color temperature and white balance of the images coming out of both these lenses as closely as possible. You can even zoom in 2 times on both these phones, but they don't have a telephoto lens. So the images that we are seeing here are just digitally cropped in. If we zoom in further on these images, we can see that the ones from the iPhone 11 are holding on to much more details than the ones on the POCO X2. And since these images are just zoomed in images from the primary sensor, we can say for a fact that the 12 megapixel sensor on the iPhone 11 is somehow capturing sharper and more detailed images than the 64 megapixel sensor on the POCO X2. As mentioned before, these were 16 megapixel images from the POCO X2. If you want, you can switch to the 64 megapixel mode as well, but be advised that these images are 3 to 4 times larger in terms of file size, and you will have to zoom in 5 to 6 times to see any noticeable difference between the 16 and 64 megapixel images, which in my opinion is not worth all the extra storage space. So shooting in the default 16 megapixel mode would give you just as good images with lower noise because of the larger individual pixel size, and you won't run out of the internal storage because the file sizes are not that large. Before we move on to the close-up and macro shots, here is a quick test between the focusing speed of both these cameras. iPhone 11 is very quick at switching the focus from near to far object and then back again, and it does this smoothly, which feels very natural. POCO X2 is a hair slower at switching the focus, but you might notice this difference only when you are comparing them side by side. What is more noticeable is the abrupt switch in focus. This is not an issue while taking images, but while shooting videos, it looks very jittery. Thanks to the quick and accurate focusing, close-up shots from both these phones look really good. Subject is in perfect sharp focus, and since they have a wide aperture, background gets a nice optical blur. iPhone 11 again shows better details in the main subject, and just like before, it also handles the exposure in a much better way. There was a good wind while taking these images, so these flowers were moving all around the place. But both these phones still managed to set the focus and take a sharp enough picture. As good as these close-up images look from the iPhone, there is only so much closer that you can get to the subject and still be able to set the focus. POCO X2 has a macro lens and lets you get as close as 2.5 cm to your subject and still set the focus, letting you take these amazing macro shots. Look at how amazingly detailed these macro shots are. Just make sure to click them in daylight, preferably when there is a bright sun around, or else they might turn out to be all noisy. Coming to the portrait shots. This is my favorite camera mode on smartphones, and if you don't use this mode on your smartphone, you are missing out a lot. Portrait mode on smartphones is the easiest way to give your images a professional look and make them feel like they have been taken with an interchangeable lens camera and an expensive prime lens. Portraits on the iPhone show better colors and skin tones, but I much rather prefer the accurate edge detection of the POCO X2 for these shots. Background looks much more natural in the shots from the iPhone 11, and the subject is a bit softer in the images from the POCO X2. So I hope both these phones get even better at this with software updates. The iPhone 11 captures actual depth map of the image. So using apps like Focus, you can use all this information and edit the areas that you want to be in focus, making the overall image look much better. Taking portrait shots with the Gcam on the POCO X2 helps a lot, and the subject is not soft anymore. But I think it takes it to a point where Gcam processing adds more sharpening, making the details in the skin appear very unnatural. It is like when you are editing an image and you pull the clarity and sharpness slider all the way up, which doesn't always look good, especially when you are trying to photograph people. As much as I like the edge detection from the portraits of the POCO X2, I prefer the overall colors and look of the portraits on the iPhone 11. On the POCO X2, there is this new movie mode within the portrait mode. This mode lets you take 21:9 images with the black bars at the top and bottom, giving your portrait shots a very nice cinematic look. And for the top and bottom bars, you can either let them be as they are or just crop them out in editing. Both phones can take portrait shots of objects as well. POCO X2 again shows better edge detection, while the iPhone 11 struggles a bit when objects have complex edges. That being said, these shots look good from both the phones. There is slightly more contrast in the portraits on the POCO X2, which depending on your preference, you may or may not like. the iPhone 11 shows a much better dynamic range in these images. You can see the bright background being completely blown out in the images from the POCO X2, while it is properly exposed in the portraits on the iPhone 11. Coming to the images shot in indoors, artificial and lower lighting situations. This is where the difference in these images starts getting wider. We can see the iPhone 11 capturing more details compared to the POCO X2. And there is also a noticeable difference in the way they capture colors. POCO X2 makes these images look a bit warmer than the actual scene, while the iPhone 11 preserves the actual colors of the scene as they were. As we zoom in, we see that the images from the iPhone 11 show more details, and even with the night mode turned off in these images, iPhone 11 ended up capturing more light. To help it take better images in lower light, POCO X2 gets a night mode, and that really does make a big difference. Images with the night mode turned on look much better than the ones without it. But this time iPhone 11 also gets the night mode, so its images, which were already better and detailed, get an even bigger boost. Its night mode images are still better and more detailed than the ones from the POCO X2. Most of the night mode images from the iPhone 11 are also much cleaner with lower noise levels. In these conditions, you can use the night side mode in the Gcam on the POCO X2 to make it take even better and detailed images. But just be aware, night side mode on the Gcam might ask you to hold the phone steady for almost 15 seconds. And it is very difficult to hold the phone steady for so long, and we just end up with blurry looking images most of the times. But if you are willing to be patient and hold the phone extremely steady for each of the shot, night side mode on the Gcam gives you much better results than the night mode on the native camera. That brings us to the front facing camera. POCO X2 has a high resolution sensor, but its selfies don't seem to have much more details than the selfies of the iPhone 11, which also shows better skin tones and overall better colors in general. On the POCO X2, beauty mode is on by default, so you will have to turn it off every time you want to switch to the front facing camera, which is a bit annoying. iPhone 11 again shows much better dynamic range in these selfies, and the skin tones just look too washed out from the POCO X2. For the portrait selfies, POCO X2 does a better job with edge detection, whereas the iPhone 11 constantly blurs out some parts of my hair. But again, all other issues like softer subject, washed out colors and bad dynamic range still remain in the portraits of the POCO X2, so I would much rather prefer the better looking portrait selfies from the iPhone 11. Here's a video from the front facing camera of the POCO X2 and the iPhone 11. You can see how both these phones are handling the overall colors of the scene, exposure and stabilization when I'm walking around with them. You can also let me know in the comments which one is speaking my voice better. Coming to the video performance. Personally, I think no smartphone budget or flagship can beat current iPhone's video capabilities. But the 4K 30fps videos that the POCO X2 can take look pretty good. These videos get electronic stabilization, which is always nice to have. These 4K videos from the POCO X2 are a bit too oversaturated for my liking, but I still appreciate it taking good and stabilized videos. 1080p 30fps videos are also stabilized from the POCO X2, but it struggles a lot in terms of dynamic range. If you like taking slow motion videos, both can take 240fps slow motion videos in 1080p resolution. POCO X2 can take things even further and shoot 960fps super slow motion videos in 720p resolution. So after looking at over 100 image and video samples, what do you think the conclusion is? If you have been keeping score, iPhone 11 can capture detailed images despite of having a lower resolution sensor. Colors are natural and much more pleasing from the iPhone 11 in any lighting conditions. POCO needs to improve the dynamic range on their X2 a lot via software updates. Wide lens on the iPhone 11 is a bit wider of the two, and it captures more details and much better colors which are in sync with the primary lens. POCO X2 does let you take high resolution images, but as seen in the video, there aren't too many differences in those images compared to the normal 16 megapixel ones. However, it is the only one which lets you take macro shots thanks to a dedicated macro lens at the back. Portrait shots on the iPhone 11 are better, detailed and show amazing dynamic range, but the POCO X2 does offer a better edge detection while separating the subject from the background. And in lower lighting conditions, iPhone 11 performs better both with and without the night mode. You can obviously install Gcam APK on your POCO X2, and that will give you better results than its primary camera. But even with the Gcam installed, most of the images from the iPhone 11 ended up coming on top. And not to mention that getting a working Gcam APK installed on your device is a pain in itself, and most of the people getting this POCO X2 are not even going to worry about it. All this being said, overall camera performance of the POCO X2 is not too far behind, and many of the differences are only visible if you know a lot about photography or if you zoom in too deep and compare these images side by side. Otherwise, on its own, most of the images from the POCO X2 look good, and I feel majority of the average users will be happy with its camera performance. So that brings me back to the point which I mentioned towards the starting of this video. iPhone 11 obviously has a better set of cameras, and rightly so because you are paying a lot for it. But despite of coming in at 1/4 the price, cameras on the POCO X2 are also really good, and all of these images have been a proof that cameras on budget smartphones are getting so good that they can go head to head with some of the flagship smartphones. These have been my thoughts and views about the cameras on these two phones. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. And if you don't agree with my analysis of these images, you can go back, mute the video, watch it in the highest resolution that your device supports, and draw your own conclusion that way. If you are planning on getting any one of these phones, I will really appreciate if you get them from the affiliate links in the description section. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but every purchase you make helps me in making these very detailed videos for you guys. That is it for this video, guys. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe to the channel for more quality tech videos like this. You can also check out some of the other videos from this channel. This has been Sagar, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Take care.